she's not cold. She's testing your depth. You just don't know it yet, because most men don't. Most men confuse emotional stillness with rejection, confuse silence with absence, confuse boundaries with abandonment. You thought she pulled away because you weren't good enough. You thought she stopped texting because she lost interest. You thought her shift in energy meant you failed some invisible exam, and maybe you did, but not in the way you think. The feminine doesn't test like a school teacher. She doesn't hand out instructions, clear questions, or answer keys. Her tests are intuitive, primal, often unconscious, even to herself. She's not evaluating your resume. She's feeling your essence, feeling if your presence deepens when tension rises, or if you collapse the moment her warmth retreats. Because here's the truth. Any man can be calm when things are easy. Any man can feel masculine when she's laughing at his jokes, leaning into his body, reflecting his confidence back at him. But when she goes quiet, when she stops making it easy for you to feel like a man, most men crumble. They get reactive. They explain themselves. They beg, kid. They become boys again, desperate for the mother's approval. That's when she knows. There's no depth here, no anchor, no weight behind the words. Only performance, only surface. And so she closes further, not to punish you, not to hurt you, but because her feminine doesn't trust anything shallow. She can feel when a man is performing strength instead of embodying it. She can feel when your attention isn't rooted, when your confidence isn't earned, when your patience is conditional. So she withdraws. She creates space. She tests your gravity, okay? And your reaction tells her everything, okay? If you chase, she knows you fear yourself, okay? If you collapse, she knows your center is weak, okay? If you get angry, she knows your masculinity is still fused to your ego, okay? But if you stay, not with control, not with cleverness, but with quiet, she feels something else, something rare. A man who doesn't flinch when the warmth disappears. A man who doesn't need to be adored to remain grounded. A man who doesn't confuse her emotional complexity with danger. That's the test. It's not whether you say the right thing, or whether you become more of yourself or less. In the absence of her approval, she's not cold. She's listening, watching, waiting to see if you are who you say you are when it is no longer convenient to be. 'Cause the feminine doesn't want consistency in your compliments. She wants consistency in your consciousness. It's not just when she's soft, but when she's silent. Not just when she's open, but when she retreats. Not just when she gives, but when she holds back. And if you're honest with yourself, you failed that test before. You called her distant. You said she was emotionally unavailable. You accused her of playing games. But maybe the game was yours. Maybe your love only worked when it was easy. Maybe your strength was only strong when it was rewarded. Maybe the man you were being was still hoping to be mothered, not met. And she felt it. She always feels it. 'Cause the feminine isn't decoding your logic. She's reading your nervous system, okay? She's attuned to what you don't say, okay? She's tuned into the emotional currents underneath your words. That's why it hurts when she stops responding. That's why it stings when her eyes no longer soften in your presence, 'cause she's not reacting anymore. She's reflecting, showing you where you're hollow, where you're reactive, where your depth ends. And that reflection can feel like rejection, okay? But it's not. It's an invitation to go deeper into stillness, into presence, okay? Into your real self, the one who doesn't vanish just because her gaze has. Most men never take that invitation. They either chase her or replace her. But the few who stay with themselves, not just with her, become something else, okay? They become the men women sense, but rarely find. Not saviors, not charmers, but space holders. Grounded men. Men who lost the need to be adored, because they already met their own silence and didn't run. And that's the only kind of man she can truly trust. You think she's pulling away because she doesn't want you, but the truth is, you never knew how to stay still when affection fades. You were never taught how to hold your own center without someone feeding it. Her silence terrifies you, not because it's cruel, but because it leaves you alone with yourself. And that's the part you don't know how to face. You've always used her warmth to regulate your value. When she's soft, you feel secure. When she's expressive, you feel strong. When she desires you, you believe you exist. But the moment that rhythm breaks, the moment she pulls back, pauses, or simply stops reflecting you, your whole structure starts to crack. That's not her fault. That's your emotional dependence masquerading as love. That's the part of you that learned long ago to feel worthy only through being wanted. And now you're not being wanted, so you panic. Start telling stories in your head. She's losing interest. She's done with me. I should pull away first. But none of that is real. What's real is your discomfort in stillness. What's real is your unintegrated hunger, your desperate need to be mirrored back constantly, because you haven't built the internal space to hold your own identity without her reflection. So when she stops mirroring, when she goes quiet, you don't just miss her, you lose yourself. That's why it hurts so much. That's why her silence feels like betrayal. It's not about her, it's about your dependency. And that's exactly what she's sensing. Not your strength, not your potential, but your emotional architecture. She doesn't need to know psychology to feel it. She just knows, instinctively, when a man is using her as a life support system. And she pulls back, not because she is cruel, but because something in her refuses to be your emotional crutch. The feminine isn't interested in being your rescue. She wants to feel your weight. Not your force, not your performance, your weight. That gravitational center inside you that remains intact, even when she disappears for a while. Especially then, she wants to know, can you still hold yourself when I'm not holding you? Can you stay in your integrity when I'm not validating it? Can you honor me when I offer nothing but my absence? That's the test, and not just of love, but of masculinity. Most men try to control her behavior to avoid this test. Explain, fix, pressure, negotiate. It's anything to pull her back into emotional availability, because her silence is unbearable. But the silence is the lesson. The discomfort is the invitation. And most men fail because they never stay long enough to hear what the silence is saying. It's saying, you're still looking to her for approval. You're still outsourcing your self-worth. You're still afraid of your own emptiness. That emptiness isn't a flaw. It's a doorway. It's the exact place where depth is born. But only if you can sit inside it without reaching for something to fill it. That's where presence is forged. That's where men stop performing and start embodying. And that's the kind of man she's looking for. Not someone who reacts when she retreats, but someone who becomes even more real, more still, more certain. She doesn't want your need. She wants your groundedness. She wants to feel your spine, not your desperation. Because if she can feel that, if she can lean into your depth instead of carrying your fragility, she begins to trust you, not just with her body, but with her vulnerability, with her chaos, with her surrender. And that's when she returns. Not because you convinced her, but because you became someone she can return to, someone she can fall into without losing herself, someone who doesn't flinch when love becomes uncertain. She's not cold. She's tired of men who collapse under pressure. She is just waiting to see if you stop trying to fix her silence and start learning from it. 'Cause if you can learn to stay with your breath, your pain, your center, you'll stop mistaking stillness for rejection. And you'll realize she was never leaving you. She was waiting to meet the man behind the mask. So now you understand. Her silence wasn't abandonment. It was the mirror you kept avoiding. And if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with yourself through the discomfort, something begins to shift. You stop needing her reaction to feel secure. You stop reaching for control. You stop demanding that she reassure you with affection just to calm your internal chaos. Instead, you start doing something most men never learn. You begin holding space, not as a tactic, not to win her back, but because you've started to build a foundation inside yourself that doesn't collapse under uncertainty. This is what it means to lead emotionally, not to dominate, but to ground. Because the feminine doesn't want to be led by force. She wants to be led by depth. And depth only reveals itself when everything familiar is stripped away. That's why she pulls back, not because she wants a reaction, but because she wants revelation. Can you meet her there? Can you enter the silence and find stillness instead of panic? Can you stay open even when you feel unseen? It's what she's feeling for. Not your bravado, not your seduction, but your energetic spine. Because when a woman tests your depth, she's really asking, is there anywhere in you I can rest? Not just physically, but spiritually. Can I fall apart around you and trust that you won't? Can I be chaos without being punished? Can I bring my fire without being burned by yours? And if the answer is no, if your stillness disappears the moment her affection does, she'll know you can carry what she is holding, and she won't say it. She'll just vanish. That's not rejection. That's self-protection. A woman cannot risk intimacy with a man who cannot hold himself. She won't risk her heart for a boy in a man's body. In the moment she senses you can stay with her through discomfort, she'll withdraw to avoid carrying your shame too, because that's what it becomes for her. A weight, a burden, a pattern she's seen before. The boy who asks to be mothered. The man who offers masculinity, but only if it's met with constant praise. She's not judging you for it, but she can give herself to it either. That's what you have to understand. Silence isn't a punishment, it's a signal. It's her way of saying, I can trust the space you're re-offering. And if you're wise, you won't argue with that signal. You won't try to convince her otherwise. You'll let it break you open, because that break is sacred. That break is the exact place where all the pretending ends, where the mask falls, where the boy you've been pretending not to be finally shows himself. And that's the beginning. Not of getting her back, but of becoming someone you, Dan T, have to lose her to understand. A man who doesn't need to be told what to do in love, because he knows who he is in silence. Because he has made peace with being unseen. And that peace is exactly what the feminine is always testing for. Not because she wants to cause pain, but because she wants to feel safe. And only a man who has met his own pain without breaking can hold her in hers without fear. That's when she stops pulling away. That's when she opens. Not because you pushed, but because you passed the test. Now she begins to soften, but not in the way you imagined. Not with fireworks, not with romance, not with the return of her constant attention. Her softening is quieter than that, more sacred. It's the subtle way her body relaxes near you again. It's the way her breath deepens when you speak. The way she no longer scans your energy looking for cracks in your center. Because now you're not reacting. You're not chasing. You're not gripping her energy like oxygen. You're simply there, whole-rooted.com, and she feels it. Not in her mind, but in her body. She doesn't trust your words. She trusts the quiet your nervous system carries. That's what makes her feel safe. Not the promises, not the poetry, but the consistency of your emotional weight. When you hold that space without needing anything from her, something ancient unlocks. She realizes she no longer has to perform, no longer has to mother you, no longer has to manage your moods just to be herself. Ali, that's when she starts to come forward. Not out of duty, not to reward you, but because her feminine can finally breathe. She knows you can handle her now, not because you control her, but because you don't collapse when she expands. You don't fight her intensity. You don't need her softness to validate your masculinity. You meet her exactly where she is. Chaotic, radiant, unpredictable, and you remain unchanged. That's the kind of man she didn't believe existed. And she may still test you, not out of suspicion, but because safety doesn't erase instinct. She may still go quiet, still withdraw for a moment, still sink into herself just to see, are you still there? And now you are. You no longer fear her rhythms. You understand that love is not made of certainty, it's made of presence. That's the difference between a man who performs masculinity and a man who embodies it. The first talks about holding space. The first needs her to be consistent so he can stay composed. The second becomes her consistency by being unshaken. This is the moment where everything shifts in a relationship, where polarity deepens, where her feminine feels safe enough to surrender, not because you asked her to, but because you gave her nothing to fight. And in that surrender, love is no longer a negotiation. It becomes a resonance. Two nervous systems no longer battling for control, but vibrating together in something still, strong, and deeply alive. And she might not even say it. She might not thank you. But you'll feel it in the way she touches you differently, in the way she lets you in, in the way her body no longer holds tension when you're near. That's how you know you passed her test. Not by getting her back, but by becoming a man she can stop defending herself from. And this isn't something you perform once and forget. This is a way of being, a daily practice of presence, a refusal to abandon yourself when emotions rise, because now you see it clearly. Every time she went quiet, every time she turned cold, every time she created distance, she wasn't trying to reject you. She was trying to find you. The real you, the one who exists beneath the need to be loved, the one who remains even when affection fades. That's the man she was waiting to meet all along. And now, so are you. Now you move through the world differently. Not louder, not sharper, just deeper. You walk like someone who's no longer waiting for approval. You speak like someone who no longer needs to prove. There's a gravity in you now. It's not a heaviness, but a stillness. The kind that others feel before you even open your mouth. Because now you know. Real presence isn't in what you say, but in what you no longer need to say. That's what she was always feeling for. Not your words, not your charm, not your effort, your nervous system, your truth. And now, when you meet a woman, you dainty ask whether she'll choose you. You ask whether she'll meet you in the space you've earned. You don't beg for attention because your worth doesn't depend on being seen. You don't flinch when she needs distance because you no longer fear silence. You've made a home in the space she once used to test you. And now, whether she stays or leaves, whether she's soft or guarded, whether she opens or folds, none of it shakes you because your center isn't hers to hold anymore. It's yours. That's the difference between a boy seeking love and a man giving it. One is hungry, the other is whole. One needs proof, the other becomes proof. And women feel that. They feel it in your tone, your eyes, your stillness. They feel it in the way you chase. Not because you care, but because you don't abandon yourself anymore. You learned the lesson she never meant to teach, but had to. That love isn't about convincing someone to stay. It's about staying with yourself so completely that even when they leave, you remain. And now, the men around you are confused. They ask for tactics. They want lines, strategies, step-by-step confidence. But you offer something else. The unshakable presence of someone who has sat in the fire of feminine silence and didn't run. You don't teach it, you live it. And for the few who are ready, it changes everything, because this is the kind of man the world needs more of. Not reactive, not performative, not armored in false strength, but open, grounded, fierce in presence, soft in spirit. A man who can hold the wild, unpredictable beauty of the feminine, not because he controls it, but because he's no longer afraid of it. And that's the man she was trying to find when she went quiet. That's the man who can love without fear. It's the man who no longer mistakes tests for rejection, it's distance for disinterest, coldness for contempt. Because now, you see, clearly, she was never cold. She was just waiting to see if your depth was real.